I will stand around and do a song and dance because I'm going to read that one right off the get-go. I remember, well, I don't remember because I wasn't there. Could you shut the door, the door, Anna? Ann, Miss Ann. Hey, you. Anna, could you shut the door, please? Thank you. I'll tell the story because I wasn't actually there. I didn't witness it. I was working third shift, well, to say third shift, in the newspaper business Sunday. Sunday's paper was the biggest and the most profitable, and I have to be honest, I wasn't back in church. It was always my excuse not to go to church because I was working. But Laura would get the girls together, and they were so little, and she would, well, she had to go through the whole process. Where are your shoes? I don't know. Well, find your shoes. Oh, I don't know where they are. And so she'd spend the whole time looking for shoes and looking for tights and looking for all that stuff. And then, you know, sometimes she'd get a little upset with the girls, and she'd let them have it. And one particular Sunday, she had been there, and she got a little upset at the girls, but as they came into church that morning, Pastor Phelps ran out to the car, and she went, and he went, and he said, "Oh, Miss Laura, let me help you." And so he brought in Jenna, who was just a baby, and Laura was bringing in Casey. He said, "Oh, thank you so much. It's so good to be here this morning." And Casey looked up at her and said, "Why are you being so nice now?" Now, I see some of you laughing and some of you smiling and some of you feeling guilty because you've gone through that before. I just told that story, number one, because my wife is not in the room. But she's told that story many times. And number two, because I had to give you time to look up the scripture. Children, obey your parents, verse 1, in the Lord, for this is right. Honor thy father and thy mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with thee, and thou mayest live long on the earth. Now, I'm not going to tell you to turn back to Exodus chapter 20, but the children of Israel are standing at the foot of Mount Sinai. And the voice of the Lord is booming from the mountain, and the children of Israel are just kind of there scared. And God said, "Thou shalt not have any other gods before me. Thou shalt not make any graven image. Thou shalt not use the Lord thy God's name in vain. Thou shalt remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Thou shalt honor thy father and thy mother, which is the first commandment with the promise that your days may be long upon the earth." Then it goes into a bunch of, before that promise that God gave the children of Israel, and gives to us today for that matter, because it was repeated by the Apostle Paul in the New Testament. Before all of that, God told us how we are to deal with him. Basic rules still should be followed today. And then after that, he says, "Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt..." And he goes through the whole list of things, how we're to treat each other. But of all those commandments, is only one with a promise. Honor thy father and thy mother. So we're going to get rid of the father this morning and just say our job as people, whether they are here today, or perhaps they live far away, or perhaps they've gone on and are with the Lord this morning, we are honoring all of our mothers today. It says in Genesis chapter 3, verse 20, "And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living." In fact, that's what the name Eve means, is living. Today, we honor our mothers. Today, we remember our mothers. Now, why do we honor our mothers this morning? Why do we honor their memories this morning? Well, first off, We honor our mothers because they gave us life. Thank you, Mom. We often forget this one little fact. Your mother brought you into this world. She carried us for 9 months. She went through the pain of childbirth to bring us into the world. And if your mother was like my mother, she would remind you of the 87 hours of labor that she spent to bring you into this world.
Amen.
But only when you wanted them to feel guilty about something, right?
Yeah.
Now, I know there's a certain amount of suffering, and there's a whole lot of pain that goes along with childbirth. Carol Burnett once said, the best way to describe having a baby is taking your lower lip and pulling it over your head. Now, honestly, people, I wouldn't know about that. But I do know, being in the delivery room twice, that there was one person in that room that wasn't having a pleasant time. But we need to remember these brave women. And I say brave women because it's only been recently that childbirth has not been as deadly as it's been throughout the centuries. We should remember that bravery, and we should honor them this day. Today we honor mothers because they gave us love. She was the first one to love you. How do I know that? She literally risked her life to bring you into this world. Now, I know as a father, I love my kids the moment I looked on them. I remember when, many of you people may remember I used to be much larger than I am today. Yes, I'm still pretty big, but I used to be bigger. You know how I lost weight? I looked at Ivy when she was born, my oldest granddaughter, and said to myself, if I'm 290 pounds, I will never see her get married. I'll never meet her children. And that became the inspiration of me to lose weight. It's an ongoing battle. I lose, I gain, I lose, I gain, but at least I've kept 30 pounds off. Thank you, Jesus. You know, but I have to say, the day I became a father was the day that Casey had a bad reaction to a vaccine. And we had to take her into emergency, and she had 105 temperature, and she was laying on a stainless steel table. It was cool, and it was bringing her temperature down, and I could do nothing. Then I realized how much I loved that child, and subsequently loved Jenna, that I would be willing to give my life for it. Listen, Laura, she has a blood condition. I'm sharing stuff. For her to have one child was risky. For her to have 2 children was risky. But just the desire to have those kids, to love those kids, to hold those kids, she was willing to take that. She was willing to do that. You know, it may have taken me a few months to learn how to be a father, but she was a mother before our kids even came into the world. And she loved them. When they got dirty faces before church on Sunday, she still loved them. I think of my own mother. As my brother and I got into a wrestling match before we went out to get the family portrait taken, and Jack ripped my shirt. She still loved us. Breaking her grandmother's favorite cup. That porcelain cup that was given to her by her grandmother. And I broke it. She still loved me. You know, your mother's loved you no matter what. We call that unconditional love, and I think the only love on this earth that we can compare with God's love is the love a mother has for their children. And it's because of that love that we learned how to love. We honor our mothers today because they gave us life, and we honor our mothers today because they loved us. Next, we honor our mothers because of the lessons they taught us. My wife read something that she saw on the World Wide Internet Web this week, and I'll share it with you. A little boy was proud of himself. He had put his shoes on all by himself, and he walked up to his mother with pride and said, "Look, Mommy, I put my shoes on." And the mother looked down and noticed that they were on the wrong feet. And she said, "Oh, Johnny, that's so wonderful. But you put them on the wrong feet." And the little boy looked down and had a puzzled look on his face and said, "But Mommy, I only got the 2 feet." Wait for it to catch up. You'll get there. You know, it was our mothers who taught us how to put our right shoe on our right foot and our left shoe on our left foot. Think about it. They're the ones that probably taught you how to tie your shoes. Except for Jenna, who has Velcro. She doesn't wear shoes. You know what? They taught us so many things. They taught us how to count to 10. They taught us how to speak the language. They taught us about Jesus and the Word of God. We honor our mothers because they gave us life. We honor our mothers because they loved us. And we honor our mothers for the lessons that they taught us. Next, we honor our mothers for the liberty that they gave us. Now, liberty for a parent to give to their children happens in stages, and there's stages that generally happen at certain times in a child's life. For example, who remembers their first day of school? Okay, the rest of you people don't remember the first day of school, okay? Debbie's over, I don't remember my first day of school. Yeah, that was so long ago. I do. I remember the first day Jenna went to school. Laura said, "You have to go to school today." He said, "I don't want to." He said, "No, but you have to." He said, "I don't want to." He said, "Okay, then will you visit your dad and I in jail?" And she said, "Why?" He said, "Because if you don't go to school, we'll go to jail." And she looked at Laura and said, "Okay, I'll go to school." And so she went to school just to make sure that we stayed out of jail. Next day, Laura was told Jenna, "Okay, you have to go to school." And she said, "Again? I went yesterday." She thought it was all over. Jenna was an interesting student. Her kindergarten teacher said, "I worry about Jenna." I said, "How come?" She says, "Because she's so serious. She doesn't want to do recess. She doesn't want to do anything." And Laura told her, said, "No, she thinks that's a waste of time. You need to get everything done so she can go home." But you know what? The first day you went to school, I can tell you what your mom did. That was one of the most nervous days in her life. Now, maybe with the first child, it's a nervous day. Maybe with the second child. They're both going to school today. Oh, Mike knows that one. You know, but, you know, she had to let go gradually. She had to let him go. You know, the first time you let your kid go down the street to the other kid's house, you remember that feeling? The first time you let them go for a sleepover when they got a little older. Okay, here's a scary one. Ready? The first time you let them drive the car all by themselves. Now, it may have only been to the store, but you counted every second until they got back home. How about their first date, huh? I'll guarantee both parents were up on pins and needles until you got home. Then there's giving you the freedom of, well, leaving home. Perhaps it was going to college. Perhaps it was you had to move to another city for a job. Perhaps it was the day you got married and moved out. You may not realize it, but every time she let you go a little bit, she gave you a little more freedom until the point that you could handle the responsibility of that freedom at just the right time in your life. She made you the person that you are today because she gave you liberty as you went along. Yes. We honor our mothers because they gave us life. We honor our mothers because they loved us. We honor our mothers because they taught us life lessons. And we love our mothers because they gave us liberty. Next, we honor our mothers because they gave us a legacy. Now, my thinking on this one is because they gave us a heritage, but if you've noticed, this is an L sermon from life, love, lessons, all that, working my way down here. And so I kind of changed it to legacy because in my own mind I thought that heritage and legacy were the same thing, but in many ways they're not. The definition of the word legacy, according to the Oxford Dictionary, is an amount of money or property left to someone in a will. The example they gave is, my grandmother died and left me a small legacy. The second definition of the word legacy is the long-lasting impact of a particular event, action, etc. that took place in our past or of a person's life. The example they gave was she left us a rich legacy with her music. A legacy is something that is handed down. It is something that is given from one person to the next. Now, my mother taught me things that her mother taught her. My mother taught me the stories of the family castle in Scotland. Then one day I went to the tarpon store out of Canterbury Village and asked them, I would like to get a tarpon for the Humphrey family. And she says, there is no tarpon for a Humphrey family. Which made me start thinking, well, then my family must have been British lords. Which is something my mother supported. We weren't Scottish, we just made them work for us. But I'll be honest with you, I don't know how much of that is true. Or the fact that her great aunt, I think it was her great-great aunt, had married Frank James of the James Brothers, the Outlaws. Or that my great-great-grandfather was a Blackfoot Indian. I discovered after these DNA tests that that wasn't true either. Which kind of made me question everything else that they told me. But you know what? Those stories are part of my legacy. That's what they left behind. They left the stories. Some of it may be true, some of it not. But those are the stories that they left me and left my brothers, and those are the stories that I told my kids and my grandkids, and the stories my mom and Laura's mother and Laura herself told of our kids and to our grandkids. We have a wall in our house, in our dining room. We call it our heritage wall. We have pictures of our families. My grandfather and his parents are in one of the pictures, and he's a little boy, and they're there. My great-grandparents that I remember, the Granny and Granddad Stevens are there. Laura's great-great-great-grandmother, Dolly, is hanging up on that wall. Her parents, her mother and her aunt as teenagers, her father as a young child, my father and my mother as children. They're all hanging on that wall. Our grandparents. And occasionally one of the grandkids will come in and say, Gaga, who's that? And she'll go, well, that's your great-great-great-grandma Dolly. She was a mail-order bride and married your great-great-great-grandpa, who was the I got it right here. Don't. Justice of the Peace on Drummond Island. Did I get the story right?
Oh, yeah.
That's where stories start changing. Papa, who's that? Well, that's your great-great-great-great-grandparents, Granny and Granddad Stevenson. He was a teacher. He came from Southern money. And Granny was the Pied Piper of all children. When she'd visit us, we would make her tell us stories, particularly the story of the man with the golden arm. Jumped every time she'd tell that story. What's that story, Papa? Oh, you've never heard the story of the man with the golden arm? Well, let me tell you. And then I tell him the story that my great-grandmother taught me. And I pass it on to another generation. Except I gave the guy a name in my version. Laura, Mom had so many stories about Drummond Island and life on the farm and being raised on Drummond Island and being with her brothers and sisters on the farm, and she told them to our children, and our children kept trying to encourage her. Listen, you need to write a book. And the closer she got to when she was being called home to Jesus, they said, you know what, we're going to bring over a tape recorder so that you can record these stories, so that we can write a book about these stories. But can I tell you something? Those stories weren't meant for you. And those stories weren't meant for the masses. Those stories were meant for my children and their children. And they are stories that they can pass on. And are they going to be true? Well, it's like I used to tell my kids and my grandkids. They'd say, well, Grandma Letty said this. And I said, listen, kids, Grandma Letty never allowed the truth to get in the way of a good story. You know, I've been remembering my mom a lot this week. You know, before she passed away, I'm going to be honest with you, with Lauren's mom and my mom, and you know, then my kids became mothers, and all of a sudden there was a lot of mothers to go around, and to say when Mother's Day came around, you had to go visit everybody, and it almost seemed like a burden. But since the Lord took her home, I sure do miss her, and I've thought a lot about her this week, as I did last year and the year before that. And you know what? The stories of our life, of my mother, you know, they're not sad stories. They're not stories of when she was angry. You know, even the worst things that happen in your life, when you look through time, and you look back at them in your memory, they become good stories because they are part of who you are, and that's the legacy that you will pass down to your children and your grandchildren. Our mothers gave us life. Our mothers gave us love. They taught us the lessons of life. They gave us liberty, and they've left us with a legacy. And for most of our mothers, it was a time in their lives when they were barely adults. You know, sometimes you'll see an athlete who's 21 and 22 years old doing something stupid, and then somebody will go, well, they should kick them out of football, or they should kick them out of baseball, or they should kick them out of basketball. And I think to myself, wait a minute. Do you remember how stupid you were when you were 21 and 22? I remember how stupid I was. And that's when your parents started having kids. And I think that's the reason why. So that we could also learn from their mistakes. But I truly believe God made it that way. In Proverbs chapter 31, verse 28, it tells us, her children arise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. As a husband, I praise my wife this morning for the job she's done in raising our children. And for my mom, who is with Jesus, I raise my hands and call her blessed. You know what? Thank you, Mom. Thank you, all the mothers, for the job that you did. And when you stand before Jesus, I hope you hear the words, well done, my good and faithful servant. Let's stand. Lord, mothers mean a lot to us because we all had that personal relationship with them. Lord, I think of the people in our church that are not with us today, whose children are with us today. And I remember the love that they had for their kids. And how they would ask, would you pray for my son? Would you pray for my daughter-in-law? Would you pray for my grandson? And Lord, I thank you for those blessed women that were part of the heritage of this church, part of the legacy that they left behind, their love for you. Lord, I thank you for my mother. I thank you for Laura's mother. I thank you for grandparents and great-grandparents that paved the way for us today. Lord, as we honor our mothers, both alive and dead today, we thank you for them and ask you to let that memory stay fresh until the day we see them again.